in that class, the topic that we treated on Monday. Write it out in the chat so I can see. Also, for today's class, you can access the document on the Lean School app, so that you can keep abreast of what is going on as I'm teaching. I also recall that we had, I gave an assignment. There were activities that we did, and there was an assignment that was also part of what you were given last week on Monday. If you did it, indicate on the chat, raise your hands in the chat so I can know the number of people who did that assignment. So today, well, I'm still waiting to see who remembered last week's topic. Fundamental of script writing. Awesome. Thank you, Anthony Chinonso, for that. Shows that you were paying attention, and I am happy to see someone at least remember what we did. Yes, last week we did the fundamentals of script writing, and today we'll be doing the film story structure. So, if you did the assignment, please let me know in the chat. You raise your hand. I want to know the people who are serious, the people who are paying attention, and the people who are interested in growing. Because, like I said, for this class to work, for you to understand what we are doing, it's really important that you stick with the assignments, that you do it as a request, because what we are doing is building muscle. That's what it's called, building muscle. The more you do it, the more you learn, the better you become. Thank you, Mohammed and Moritala Yusuf, for raising your hand. Thank you for letting us know you did the assignment. So, without further ado, we'll get into the class because we have much ground to cover today. And I think the earlier we start, the better. Hopefully, we have more people join us in the class, because right now I can see we have 29 people. Ngu, Anthony Chino, so you also raised your hand. Thank you for doing the assignment. In fact, I shouldn't even be thanking you guys for doing the assignment. I expect when you sign up for a class like this, you should expect that this is one of the outputs rather, that would be expected of you. If you ever sign up for a class where it's just to teach you, then they are not interested in your growth. They're not interested in you building muscle. So the more you attend the class and you follow up with the assignments, the better you get at what you do. So like I said, we'll get into the class right now. All right. So story structure, I can see chats. Let's see. Okay. So story structure. What is a story structure? What do you understand by a story structure? And it says here that most films don't fail because of bad acting. They fail because the story has no spine. And if your audience doesn't know what the question they are waiting to see answered is, they will emotionally check out. Last week we talked about how, there are films that you see and you know that yes, the camera work is poor. It has. Sorry, could you check? Someone is doing something on. That you're doing. So last week we talked about how you can make a film, and yes, the camera work would be poor, but if the story is gripping, you would see a lot of people interested in your films. In fact, a lot of the cult classics that we know today, when you watch some of them and you see the cinematography, you see everything, you will just laugh at, what was done. But what sticks with you more is the storytelling, the story structure, how it was laid out and how it was done, and how it enabled you to also enjoy the story. So today we're going to learn, the backbone of storytelling. What gives it that invisible skeleton that enables it to stand and deliver. Not sure. So, like I said, today we'll be covering. We'll be covering different aspects of this class. We'll be covering five things. We'll be covering the dramatic question, the story spine, the opening hook and first 3 minutes, the plot development and structure models, and the plot devices, tension, and resolution. That's what we'll be discussing in today's class. And we're going to start with the dramatic question, which is considered the true foundation of film storytelling. So when you are, like I said on Monday, when you are making a movie, when you are writing a story, the first thing you consider is, who is this film for? Who is the audience for this film? And then when you are now fleshing out the story, it is about, what does this audience want from this story? What are they waiting to find out in this story? Because this is the question that will drive a lot of things about the script that you're writing. Like I said here, without it, scenes becomes episode, and you won't have stories that have momentum and other elements that makes it, worth watching. So, what's an example of a dramatic question? You have survival, truth, reunion, and justice. In survival, it's about, will this person survive in this film? Who will survive? Think of, if you watch scary movies, think of scary movies, the franchise Scream. It's about who will survive the serial killer. When you think about many serial killer films, it's about who will survive it. And we have truth, we have films where we talk about exposing the truth. Will the truth be found out? Will the secrets be exposed and people find out, the truth behind the secrets? Then you have reunion. Would there be a reunion? Is it a father looking to unite with the XY, with his child, an ex looking to unite with and the other ex? Then we have justice. Will justice prevail? When you think of the film like Law and Order, you think of two things, truth and justice. Will justice prevail? Will the truth be exposed? And these are the four critical things that provide the backbone to dramatic questions. It's what drives the structural decision on the kind of stories you want to tell. Now, when crafting a strong dramatic question, you have to have four defined things. You have to have a clear protagonist. That is, like I said, in our parlance, we say the actor. You have to have a clear actor, the protagonist. And you have to have a defined goal. What is the goal of this protagonist? And then you have to define your opposition and threats. What is the threat to this protagonist? What is preventing him or her from achieving that defined goal? And what are the stakes in place preventing this person? What are the stakes? What's the stakes that has to be achieved? What stakes are in place for the person to get? And you have to ask, so, because sometimes we create these stories and you find that they can be weak, they can be strong, these dramatic questions. So we have, will he succeed? That's a weak one. But when you say, will a young whistleblower expose a corrupt oil company before they destroy his life? For what is the stake here? If you look at this sentence, will a young whistleblower expose a corrupt oil company before they destroy his life? You have clear defined elements of the dramatic question. You have the clear goal, you have the clear threats, and you have the sense of urgency. Then we have story spine, which is the cause and effect. If you do this, this happens. So the structure is not just about just beginning, middle, and end. It's so much more than that. It's about because this has happened, then this has to happen. And if your story does not move through that cause and effects, it will just feel random. What happened that led to this? These are the things that we need to define in cause and effects. And then we have, the story spine formula, And it has, I think this is one that most of us are familiar with because we grew up listening to fairy tales. You have the once upon a time, something happened. And then every day, the animals will eat happily. They will eat together until one day, one of the animals decided not to eat. And because of that, this happened until finally they were able to eat together, and ever since then all the animals now eat together. So this is the most common formula, that was story spine formula is the most common one because most of us grew up with this kind of stories where you listen to fairy tales. This is the formula. When you look at some animated stories, it tends to follow this formula, and you have the beginning, the middle, and the end. So, and sometimes you see the cause and effects also appearing from this kind of thing because it's showing you because this happened, even just the word there, because of that, you see there's a cause there and then effects. So that is until one day, because of that, until finally and ever since then. Now, you want to write your first scene. And how do you hook your audience? Now, in the last class, we mentioned that opening scene is very vital to how a film is received. Most people cannot see through a film until they've seen the opening sequence. What is this about? And like you said here, is the first contract to your audience. It establishes the tone, it introduces the dramatic question, and it's a promise that is yet to deliver. And that's why the audience sits down to watch it. For this type, we have 5 proven types of opening hooks that every filmmaker should master. We have the hook A, in media res, that is start in motion. And what is this technique about? It drops you in the middle of an action. No explanation, no slow build. And the example we have here is a film opens with a man running through a market bleeding. Police sirens are behind him. He throws something into a child's backpack, cut to black. Now you're asking yourself, is this the protagonist? Is he the antagonist? Are the police an opposition? Are they a threat? What is the question here? What is at stake here? What exactly is in the child's bag? What exactly did he throw into the child's backpack? How important is it to the story? So it's what draws you in and makes you want to know more. Then we have the hook B, which is to show the consequence first. And the technique starts with the aftermath. It allows you to see the results before you understand the cause. It creates an immediate mystery, and backward tension. Imagine starting a film where everyone is sick. There is a plague happening. People are dying. Now the question is, why? What caused this? And the example we have here is you have a woman who is calmly washing her hands, and then there's a news report in the background saying governor found dead. And you're asking, did this woman kill the governor? Who is she? And what did the governor do to her? And then we have the hook C. And we have the hook C, the ticking clock opening. So what is this? The technique is to establish an immediate urgency with a deadline. The audience is instantly aware that time is running out. I mean, when you think of, I think most of us here must have watched 24, the series. If you remember how it starts, it just shows you 24 and then time starts ticking down, letting you know time is running out and something has to be done for it to, for before that time runs out. So we have 12 hours before an election, and then you see a journalist deleting files in panic. So for you, for the audience is okay, what's happening? I mean, why this sense of urgency? Why is the clock ticking down? What is about to happen? What are we about to find out? So it's that sense of urgency that draws in your audience. Then we have the hook D and E. We merge this, we have the mystery and the emotional disruption. So the mystery part, which is the mystery without explanation, that's the hook D. And it presents something that is strange but grounded. You know, we have an example here about a child who refuses to speak, and everybody in the village avoids him. You know, there's no explanation. I think there's a film I watched sometime last month that sort of explains this. I think the film started with a child touching a horse and the horse dropping dead. And immediately it drew me in, like, does this child have a superpower? What's the deal with this child? So it's a mystery without any explanation. And then over time, you know, the journey is now about trying to explain what is behind this mystery that we've just been shown. So you're asking why? Why is this happening? Why is this child like this? And then we have the hook E, which is the emotional disruption. And it starts with a normal scene. You have a family, reunion, cars are arriving, people are, hugging themselves, welcome, and there's a whole dinner table laid out. And then conversation is going on normal until one person says something. And yeah, it breaks. That's the start of something spiraling. Usually this kind of story is emotional disruption, is a story that I call it the spiral story. It spirals out of control. It starts so controlled, and then in the middle of it spirals, and it's as if there's this bus that does not have a brake, that can't stop, and there's things start to happen from there. And we have here a family laughing at dinner. The father receives a text, face changes, silence, cut to black. What did he read? What's going to happen next? So this is a kind of opening that can also draw in your audience. Now, we've discussed the different types of opening scenes, and we have to now remember 3 key rules. The 3 rules of a powerful opening scene. We have number 1 rule: introduce dramatic question early. The first scene should hint at the dramatic question, not fully, but you have to create this anticipation for your audience. There should be a hint at it. Then there's rule 2, which is establish tone immediately. Now, you have to, first of all, for you to establish tone, you have to learn different kinds of tones. Yeah, sometimes we say, if we mention films in genres, but this genre sort of helps us understand tones of film. When someone says this is a trailer, you already know what to expect. This is a psycho thriller. You don't know what to expect. This is a drama. You already know what to expect. This is a comedy. You already know what to expect. This is a tragedy. This is a melodrama. You already know what to expect because the tone already has been established, and then you get to understand, the audience get to understand, what this film is, what is in store for them. It's at this point that some people who don't watch horror movies tend to knock out because start, and then they get to one scene, the opening scene starts and they see something and just no, this film is not for me, and they just walk away because they can't stand horror films. Then we have rule 3, which is make something change. There has to be something that changes drastically, that because you're shifting from one point to point A to point B. Now you're shifting from safety to either danger, from trust to doubt, from order to chaos. And because without change, that scene becomes static. There has to be something changing in each scene. There has to be something that is established in each scene that shows that there's a shift in momentum or in tone. So the blueprints, architecting the first 3 minutes of your film. Now we have the visual opening. We have the protagonist action. We have introduced disturbance. And we have end with question. So this is the first 3 minutes of a film. You open it up with the visuals. We get to see the protagonist in action. We get to also understand all is not well with the protagonist. And then the question for the audience is, what exactly is wrong with this protagonist? So this is what gives you that standard opening scene, because it reviews character, it reviews momentum, and the unresolved question helps your audience stay in tune, trying to understand what it's about. Mhm. So this is an example. We have example breakdown here, the signal, a trailer opening. So now I want you to use your imagination in this. Imagine a city skyline at night, wherever your city is. Just imagine at night how it is when there is light. Let's not use when there's no light. When there's light, imagine how your skyline, your city skyline looks like. Then the scene opens with a radio host that is speaking calmly, and then there's a caller. There's a caller who is whispering, they are listening. And then the signal cuts, and the phone rings again, and a voice says, check your car. Immediately you know. So how would you think the tone of this scene would be like? What do you think this tone is like? Who is the radio host? Who is even the caller whispering? And why has he been told to check his car? This is mystery already unraveled, like already thrown into the mix. It has shown there is a threat. It has shown there's an uncertainty. It has shown that there is danger in the horizon. Now, this is your first 3 minutes, and your audience is already locked in, trying to know what happens next. Now, we go to plot development. We talked about plot in the first class. So now, how do you develop that plot that we talked about? Plot isn't just, it's not just about, oh, let's move the story, tell a story, let's move it. A plot has to have meaningful events. It has to be something that pushes the envelope. It has to be something that pushes the story deeper and deeper to unravel. It's not merely just things are happening. It has to be a chain of events that has consequences, that is forcing your protagonists to make decisions or carry out actions that would help him achieve his goal. Now, for a plot development, how does it progress? What do you have in place? And yes, this plot is strong and it progresses well. We have 5 things here. We have the inciting incident. I hope everyone knows what the word inciting is. When someone says he was incited, he was, imagine entering a bus and someone steps on your foot and hurts you, and you say, guy, you match me, or you stepped on my foot. And the person says, and so. I mean, you're already annoyed. You're already annoyed. Now that person has disrupted your day. Your day is starting, and that person has disrupted your day. So that's an example of what an inciting incident, something that disrupts the normal life. Then the escalation, obstacles, increasing difficulty. So think from that moment how it escalates. You push the person for being rude to you, the person pushes you back, and then what next? That means there's chaos about to erupt. And then you're pushing the person, we are going to 3, complication, and you end up pushing the person and the person falls down and hits their head on the floor. Now, there's a complication here, an unexpected shift. You've gone to being annoyed, to pushing and fighting, and now someone is on the floor. We don't know if this person is alive or dead. And now the crisis is, what choice would you make here? Would you run? Would you take this person to hospital? And think of people around you. What are they even about to do? Are they about to lynch you? What choice are you going to make in this point? Then imagine that person on the floor standing up. Just person stands and dust themselves. And you just realize they were just a fainting spell. The person just fainted. And now everyone is now has heaved a sigh of relief. This guy is not dead. You are lucky. You're free. And everyone walks away. So you've seen how this has progressed. Just from just understanding how your day, you know, unravels, you can understand how a story can also easily unravel from start to finish. So what are the major structure models in storytelling, in designing your plots, in structuring your stories? Now, if you're an avid film watcher, you would already know that that there is no one correct story structure. There are different kinds out there. There are different kinds out there. And they actually even deliver on proper storytelling. So there's not one that you can pick and say, oh, this is the best. Not really. At the end of the day, it's about the craft, it's about the art, which is you, how you utilize these structures. You can say, I want to use the three acts and still mess it up. You can say you want to use the nonlinear and still mess it up. But the bottom line is you have to understand how these models work in order to understand how to plot your stories to match it, how to sequence your stories and structure your stories to match it. So we're going to be exploring 5. We'll be looking at the 3 acts, Save the Cats, Hero's Journey, Freytag's Pyramid, and the nonlinear. Now, the 3-act structure. Please, if you have any question to ask, drop it in the chat, or it's best that you write it on your paper, and towards the end of the class, you can just drop it so that it's easily seen, because if you drop your question earlier, it will be missed. So write it out on paper, then towards the end of the class, you can just drop it so that when we are collating the questions, it's easily seen and then it can be easily answered. So back to the class, the 3-act structure, which is a classic film structure. If you remember in our last class, we talked about, the beginning, the middle, and end, which is the classic film structure. It's one that most people are familiar with. It's one that you can easily break stories into and, get something out of it. But it's not, it has different parts to it. It has different parts to it. It's not just about beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't end at that. It has different parts. And in this, why we call it the 3-act structure is because you do the act 1, act 2, act 3. In fact, if you've ever been involved in a stage play, you will know that this is the most used structure for storytelling for stage. They say the act 1, act 2, act 3. It helps even the audience understand, act 1. In fact, if you go to like countries abroad, sometimes even Broadway, they do act 1, act 2, act 3, and they can't finish it in a day. You see a Broadway show broken down into 3 acts, and day 1 alone is for act 1, day 2, act 2, day 3, act 3. So it's a robust film structure, which if you understand, you can easily plot your story and structure your stories. So what is Act 1? Now, this is the setup of your story. And this is just 25%. Now we have 100%, and this is just 25% of your story. Now, remember we talked about world building in class 1. That's on Monday. Now, that world building that you do, this is where you establish it. This is where you drag in people, you suck us into your story. You establish the world. You introduce your protagonist and show us his flaw. Then you introduce the inciting incidents. And then it show us the decision that commits all these things. That's your setup. So you now know your Act 1, which is 25% of the story, that you have to establish these things. Then we have the Act 2, the confrontation, which goes to 25 to 75% of your storytelling. This is where we have the rising obstacles. We have the midpoint twist, the power shifts. We have where the stakes intensify. And we have where, all is lost, nothing can happen. I think I think the film that did this perfectly for me, I'm trying to remember. Sorry, I'll be using a lot of Hollywood stories because it's easy to, they're the ones who created, they are the film industry, and most everything we know comes from them. So it's easy to look at their films and break it down. So when you think of All Is Lost moments, I'm trying to remember one of these Marvel films, the Thanos story. I remember one of those films because I remember watching it in cinema and how the audience responded to it, how they were losing. It was as if, Thanos was gaining an upper hand and all was lost. Like, this world is going to go extinct. And even in the cinema, you would hear people groan. People like, some people got up and walked away because they felt that this is too much. This is a loss. Like, everything is lost. What could possibly happen that would save this moment? And then we now saw, was it Captain Marvel? We saw the Black Panther and his team. They all arrived, and everyone in the cinema cheered because at first everyone thought everything is lost. Now, and that's where the resolution comes in, which is now 75 to 100%. That is where the final confrontation, the dramatic question, and there's a change. There's now this significant change that we see, in the mood, in everything that is happening. The confrontation is now happening. If you watch a lot of James Bond movies, they use the three-act sequence perfectly. They use the three-act sequence perfectly. So I think for this classes, it's important that you watch films. If you want to call yourself a scriptwriter, a storyteller, and you don't watch films, I don't know how you are going to do it. I don't know what magic you're going to do it. How much magic you're going to do to be a good storyteller. You have to watch these things. And the good thing about this class is that when you are exposed to these sort of, I'll call it formulas, when next you're watching a film, you would subconsciously note where these acts, act 1, act 2, act 3. So when you're watching films, pay attention to the beginning, the middle, and end, the act 1, act 2, act 3. And it will be easy for you to now understand how you can translate this for yourself. Now we have the Save the Cat, the Blake Snyder's 15-bit structure. I don't know if you know Blake Snyder, they always call it the Snyder's Cut. I think one of the most popular, this is the DC films. See the DC films, I think Superman, what was the other one? But the most popular Superman, they call it the Snyder. When you hear the Snyder's Cut, he's a director. Then they're always referring to this Blake Snyder, and he has his own style of storytelling, which is called Save the Cat, the 15 bits. It mostly focuses on emotional reading and pacing checkpoints. and it always guarantees this emotional arc and forces a transformation. In fact, let's continue. If you've watched Superman, not the one that was done, is it 2 years ago? I'm trying to remember that one. I've forgotten the title of that one, but it will come to me. So, but maybe in the course of this, if you watched it, you sort of understand where I'm going. So you have the visual snapshot of a protagonist world, the tone of his set, the floor, the before states, a struggling student failing exams, that sort of thing. You have this person's world. You get to see this person in, their current state, how they are, what they are struggling with. Then the theme is sort of established. You know, what is this going to be about? Is it going to be about finding yourself? Is it going to be about surmounting challenges in life to become the best person that you should be? Then you have the setup where we now introduce the main character, the supporting cast, the stakes, the floor, everyone that is going to make this story tick. This is where it is going to be introduced, the setup. And then you have the catalyst, the event that changes everything. He gets access to elite exam paper, you know, things, things that would enable him stay either ahead of the curve or below the curve. And then the debates, the inner conflict, the fear versus desire. Should I do this? Should I not? Should I allow the world perish? Should I, should I help them? Do they even deserve my help? So think Superman, think of that. Then you think of the beats 6 to 10. Now we've had the former beats, which is 1 to 5, and then we have 6 to 10 now. And this one is also into 5. Now we have the break. What is where the decision has been made. And this is where Act 2 actually starts. Because at this point, there is no turning back. A decision has been made. I'm going to help these people. Then you have the emotional storyline, where there is someone who steps in, who is going to either reinforce what the protagonist is feeling or not reinforce it. It could be a love interest saying, if you do this, I'm going to walk away, or if you do this, I'm standing with you. It's going to support the theme. And then you have the fun and games. That is the promise of the premise. This is called the trailer moment. This is where, this person has to start maybe training to become better. Um, you start, you just get into things that would help you, become the version of what you think would help you achieve your goal. And then you have the midpoint, which is the major shift in this story. If you've seen the animation Invincible, I think this actually captures it perfectly. I'm trying to remember the name of the character where, there's this false victory, false defeat, where, you expect him to beat a character and they beat him black and blue, and you're thinking, if they've beaten him in this one, I mean, and they beat him black and blue, that at some point everybody's like, is he alive? Is he going to? Is he going to? Is he going to achieve his goal? I mean, they broke his bone. Is he going to stand? Then we now have, and as this is happening, you now have where the bad guys now gain power. That's where you start to doubt. Will this work? I mean, our protagonist is down. I mean, what miracle is going to happen for him to regain his powers or who he is? That sort of thing. What's going to happen? And meanwhile, the bad guys are doing their thing. They are gaining power. They are gaining more territory. They are causing more havoc in the society. And then you have the next one, which is the beats 11 to 15. This which still has 5 beats inside it, and we still have the all these lost moments here where, the bad guys are winning and it looks like nothing is going to work. You're expecting a miracle cure, you're expecting to find a kryptonite, and nothing has been found. And you as the viewer, you're thinking, I mean, what's that miracle that is going to work here? Then you have the dark night of the soul, the emotional collapse, the reflection, the theme reemerges. That is, you know, the hero, that is the protagonist is now questioning. I mean, I lost to this guy. Am I worthy? Can I do this? Should I not back down? Should I just not stay down and just be like every regular person? Am I doing too much? There's this self-reflection, here. And in this part, this is usually where that supporting character usually comes in, the one that helps reinforce. This is where they come in, and that's where the theme of this film sort of reemerges. And then you have the break into three. The solution is found, the inner growth activates because, there a solution has come, the love of his life has boosted his morale. And, something has given him strength, him or her strength to like tackle this thing. And this is where this person, you know, decides to reemerge. Remember, I said decides to reemerge. And then we now have the finale where he or she reemerges based on the strength that has been garnered. And then there's a final confrontation, and there's a whole fight, there's a whole, whether it's internal conflict has been resolved, and then the dramatic question of the whole film becomes answered. And then we now have the final image, which is always a contrast to the opening image. It shows a transformation of a character, of a city, of people in that story. It shows a whole transformation that's happened as a result of the change that has gone on. Now, Save the Cats prevents a sagging second act. Remember, even though we have this thing in different beats, if you actually pay attention, you can break it. He's weak, he can't do anything, and then we see him outside trying to fly higher than he's ever flown before. And we are there with him, see him, he flies, he crashes, he flies, he crashes, he flies, he crashes, until finally he's able to, get that momentum. And you can see the happiness in his face. He's laughing, you're laughing, because you can see the struggle he went through in order to overcome, the mental block he had about being able to fly. So it helps, it always shows that emotional arc. And if you do it well, your audience will be so invested that it feels like they are also on this journey with the actor. And like I said, it forces a whole transformation, and you get to see a character that is ready to take on a new threat or old threats that were around him. Now we have the hero's journey, which is we call it the mythic transformation. There is this book that I mean, if you were born in the 80s, I think, and you went to school that period, I think almost everybody that period read Pilgrim's Progress. If you've not read it, I think it's one of the most important classics of literature. And it's so people have tried to imitate. If you've watched the film Beowulf, it actually followed that hero's journey. Like, it's borrowed from it and followed it to the end. So, like the name implies, hero's journey. You are following the hero. You're following this change in this human. You're following this person from who he is to who he's going to be later. And you find this more in epic films, and when you think of The Egg of Life, when you think of, all these films that we watched that period, that were set in, in the olden days, it follows a hero's journey. It could be spiritual, it could be any redemption, it could be anything. And it sort of has this thing about mapping a human experience, through change, through challenges, that goes through challenge. To be honest, please, if you can, find the book. I think it has versions that are written in simpler English language. Pilgrim's Progress. In fact, you would sort of understand how this thing works, the hero's journey, because it is basically designed after the Pilgrim's Progress. So the Pilgrim's Progress here we learn that it comes in 11 stages. And it starts with an ordinary world. You're just in you're just in your world, and something happens and you're called to adventure. You have to find, you're in a village, something is wrong, and let's say people are dying. People you didn't care until it's your mom, and your mom is about to die, and you ask what's the solution, and they say, we're not so sure, but we heard that there is this tree of life somewhere, that if you get the fruits and give to whoever is suffering, that they would regain themselves. And you're asking yourself to go or not to go, and you decide I have to go. And now you get on this adventure, which is called to adventure, and you set up on it. And as you're going, because you're asking you before you this call to adventure. Let's say everyone is begging you, please go. You're the only one who can do this. And at this point, you're like, should I go? Should I not go? You're trying to refuse. What's at stake? Why should I not? Why should I go for this? Why should I not go? And then you decide, I am going to go. And now that threshold is you crossing the threshold. You're leaving the familiar into the unfamiliar. Now you have left your world, your comfort zone, and you're now crossing that threshold into the unfamiliar. And you've entered the door to nowhere. You've never been on this journey before. You don't even know the road. And now you've crossed your door, and you're about to embark on this journey. And then you embark on this journey, and this journey is not easy. That's where the test comes up. You know, um, First of all, you don't even know the road. You're tired. Your food finishes, and you're like, am I going to make this? Am I going to? Is this a sign for me to go back? I mean, it's still early. Oh, I can go back home. Oh, I never even go half. I can still go back home, and that's then. Once you now decide, you know what? Regardless of what happens, I'm charging forth. I move ahead. That's when it's as if all the challenges in this world comes to you. You face so much ordeals. That's when, if it's a story like Egg of Life, you meet both the spiritual and non-spiritual. You meet, you meet cannibals and non-cannibals. You meet people who might be willing to help you, but turns out that they are not there to, they're not really there to help you as you think. Then finally, you pass this ordeal, and someone, maybe you pass your last ordeal, and let's say you've been struggling to find water, and everyone you ask has been deceiving you, showing you different paths, and finally you're able to arrive at where you can get, water. And then you get water. That's your reward, for you to continue. And then you continue with your journey, the road back. You continue with your journey. You continue with your journey. You get your reward. Continue with your journey. Pick what you want, and at the end of all these things, you get to a point where you are mentally, physically exhausted in every way, and this is where you know you have to rebuild your mindset. You have to rebuild yourself and say, no matter what I faced on this journey, no matter what it has taken me to come here, I would go back home. I would return with what I found, and I will give the people who want this what they need. So you have the full cycle of a hero's journey from start to finish. If you watch epic films, if you watch, I'm trying to remember, yeah, that's Beowulf is the one that comes to mind, because they really structured it in a way that if you understand this when you're watching it, it's easy for you to like say, yeah, this is the spots, this is the moment he's at, this is the moment he's going to get into. You're expecting this to happen. So this is best for epic films. It's best for epic films. You usually also see this if you're a gamer. If you play games a lot, video games, you actually see this a lot in video games. Now we get to the next one, that is the Freytag's Pyramid, which we consider a classic dramatic act. And this was, I would say, invented. It was used first by Gustav Freytag in 1863 for analyzing the Greek and Shakespearean dramas. That's what they use in analyzing it. And it's still relevant. And it also used where you said we also use, apart from the actor act two, which is popular for stage, it's also used for stage two, but it has also been retrofitted for filmmaking. That is for um screenplays. So, and in Freytag's pyramid, you have the five parts. We have the exposition, we have the rising action, we have the climax, we have the falling action, and we have the denouement, which is also called the resolution. And they are best used for classics, tragedies and classical dramas, stories that have clear turning points, stories that and for you to understand the tension curve. The latest film that I watched that actually employed this perfectly is Hamnet. Hamnet, the film Hamnet. If you haven't seen it, please see it. It actually employed this perfectly. So we are going to go into it now. So, like I said, all these things we've mentioned, you can if you can sit down and still break them into act one, act two, act three. And this Freytag's pyramid is no different. The exposition and rising action makes up the setup. The climax makes up the confrontation, and the falling action makes up the resolution. Okay, just let me explain. So, what is exposition? Is when you introduce the characters, the setting, and the initial situation. Then, what is the rising action? As it implies, rising action. This is where complications are being built. There's conflicts intensifying, stakes are increasing. Then you have the climax, which is the turning point, the moment of highest tension and drama. If you watch Hamnet, you will sort of understand. You can fit this thing perfectly into it because Hamnet is a version of Hamlet. If you read Shakespeare, if you read Shakespearean works and you read Hamlet too, um, yeah, Hamlet was about Hamlet, and in the film it was focused on Hamlet. And if you watched it, you see the right introduction of characters. We get to see the wife. We get to see you get to see Hamlet's father, the mother, how they even came to marry, what's special about Hamlet's mother, the gifts she bestowed on her kids. And then you have the rising action, which is that Hamlet's father has to make a living. He's having a hard time. They are in a pastoral community, but he cannot farm. He's considered weak because he doesn't know how to, you know, family is not his thing. Let us put it like that. It's not his thing. He likes to write and he wants to write. And the wife decides, you know what? Why don't you go to the city? Why don't you go to London, where the arts scene, they would appreciate your gifts. And then he goes, you know, he moves to London. He comes back. But this is back and forth, sort of is creating tension in his family because as the family is increasing, he's giving birth to kids. They are giving birth to kids. Sort of disrupting the family life. He's going and coming is disrupting the family life. And he wants them to move to the city, but the wife says we can't move to the city because one of our child is very sick and London air would be good for her. So you can see the conflict is mounting here. And the climax now gets to where Hamnet, the child who they don't want to move to the city, falls ill. She falls ill and is at the point of death. Like he's at the point of death. And somehow her twin, who is Hamnet, sort of makes a prayer and said, rather than you dying, Lord, take me, rather than taking my sister. And then he dies instead of the sister. And then their father comes back and realizes that Hamnet is dead, and Hamnet is his only son. And at this point, the wife is blaming him. It's because you were not around, it's because you were traveling. So this is the climax, like a death has happened. What could go wrong? What could go, more wrong than this? A death has happened. And now we go to the falling action. What's the consequence? A marriage that is strained. The marriage is strained. We don't know. Are they getting divorced? Are they separating? And the wife says, you know what? Why don't you want to write? Just get away, go to London, go and live your life, go and keep writing. And then, in this falling action, we also get to learn that the man writes a story, a drama for his son, and the wife gets to hear about it, and she's angry and like, why is he writing a story about our child? I'm going to London to go and see this drama. I'm going to go and confront him. And then we have the denouement, that is the resolution. She gets there and she watches, she's initially angry, and then she watches the drama and sees the heart and soul her husband pours into it. And she feels the weight of this drama and sees that, yes, because she always believed that the husband was not grieving their child as much as she was grieving the child. And she sees that he was able to capture his grief. She through the drama, this is the Hamnet drama. She gets to see that he has grieved this child and is still grieving this child. And that makes them reunite as a family. So you see how it's resolved. So that's why I said, please watch the film. It's really sort of it's you can't help but see how the Freytag's pyramid works out in this film. Now we have the non-linear structure, which is called the breaking chronology. We all know what a chronology is, which is something that has a sequence, from A to B to C to D to E. But in this, we see things that, they are in places they are not meant to be. We see E as A, we see B as D, they are sort of scattered, but there is a sense to it. There's a sense to it. We also see where, um, yeah, so in this one, we have flashback structure. We give an example here. If you watch the Godfather Part 2, you understand this. We also have the reverse chronology, memento, irreversible. That is a story that is told backwards. We also have the fracture timeline. That is multiple timelines interwoven. We have the Pulp Fiction. We have the Dunkirk. Like I mentioned in the first class, the king of this is Christopher Nolan. He loves this no structure. Like he lives for it. This no structure thing. He lives for it. Why? Because it's like a story within a story, and it helps create mystery and suspense. It also allows you to juxtapose the themes, and it reviews the character through the past and the present. You get to contrast a character through the past actions, the present action, and it actively keeps an audience engaged. And I have to be honest, this kind of structure needs is a, it's you have to be an expert. You have to be an expert at being able to provide clarity to use this, because if you don't provide clarity, you can lose your audience and they can become confused. Like I said, a lot of people tend to say Christopher Nolan's films are confusing, and that's because of it. Sometimes people say, oh, you need to be very intelligent to understand Chris Nolan's films. Well, I don't really subscribe to the intelligence part, but um the bottom line is there's an audience that understands the film. That's just the bottom line. People who watch it and understand it. So you have, this structure used in telling a story, for you to understand the past, the present, and you can have multiple timelines in the same story, things happening and all that. So we move to plot devices. And what are they? Plot devices are structural tools used to drive a story forward. Used to drive a story forward. It's like your toolkit. And if you use it well, it can pay off because it creates the suspense, the surprise elements. But if it's not used very well, your audience would feel like you're trying to fool them. You've created a story that is very poor, and you're trying to fool them, try to make them understand, try to make them feel like they're incapable of understanding your story. So you have to master these devices in order to elevate your storytelling. Now, We have plot device, part one. So we'll be looking at four in this part one. We'll be looking at foreshadowing. We'll be looking at red herring, MacGuffin, and ticking clock. Now, if you've been on TikTok for a while, there's a time there was a trend that was called foreshadowing. It was as if people just discovered the foreshadowing technique and used it in their TikTok videos. Although a good portion of people used it wrongly. So I have to explain it here. So you start a film, you're watching a film, and the character is saying, just not just without ceremony, a character, says, I can't swim. And then later on, they're invited to a boat cruise. And the cruise is going well until, let's say, something happens and the boat starts to sink. And this is when you realize, there's a problem here. Oh. This character mentioned before that they can't swim. So how are they going to do it? Now, you mentioning it before, you foreshadowed it. And usually, because of the way it's done, the audience tend to forget it. It's when they come to that critical moment that they kind of have that flashback. In the beginning, this person actually mentioned that they can't swim. So it now lets the audience know that this is going to be a tough one. Now we have a red herring. What is a red herring? It's a false lead to misdirect an audience. It's used in mysteries, trailers to keep the audience guessing. There is a range of films that we call the whodunit films. Whodunit. It's just who did it, but it's called the whodunit films. Like, who did this? And this red herring, this red herring is typically used to misdirect an audience. You're watching a film and you think, I know who did it. And at some point, can you hear me? At some point, you realize it was a false lead. The person that wrote the story misdirected you. They made you think that this character is the one who did it. Meanwhile, the character who did it has been in the plain view of everyone all this while. Then we have the MacGuffin. MacGuffin, yeah. It's an object that drives the plot, but it's not thematically central. So think of the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, how, that briefcase was shown almost everywhere. It drives a plot, but is not really, really central to a story. You get? I'm trying to remember a Nigerian film that's trying to remember one. But yeah, you see an object in a film and you think, oh, this is really important, but not really. It just drives the plot. It's not make or break of the story. It doesn't break the story, it doesn't make it, but it just helps the plot move forward. And then you have the ticking clock. We've talked about 24. If you watch the series 24, how a deadline can create an instant tension. A bomb has to be disabled in how many minutes, or else things go bad. I think if you watch the series Hijack, it sort of use that ticking time bomb thing to illustrate it. And then we go to part two of the plot devices. We have the dramatic irony. We have the reversal, also known as peripeteia. We have the recognition, also known as anagnorisis. And we have the cliffhanger. Is it anagnorisis or I think it's more of anagnorisis. And then we have the cliffhanger. So what is the dramatic irony here? It's when when your audience is watching and they know more about the character. They know more than the character knows about what's happening. Think of scary films, think of Scream. You can see the killer in the background, but they cannot. The main character cannot. The audience is like, look at your back, look at your back. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And because they can see it, but the character in the story can't see it. They are blind to it. So there's sort of suspense. Then you have the reversal, peripeteia, which is a sudden flip in fortune. You know, a hero wins a case and you think, this is it, and then he gets arrested and said, oh, you're arrested for another thing that has happened. You know, um, you imagine like Superman, to being taken to court for destroying the city while trying to save people, and then he wins the case. And as he's stepping out of the court, he's being arrested for the death of someone. It's no longer about destroying the cities. Now the destruction has resulted in a homicide, and he's now arrested. So there's a reversal. Then you have recognition, where the character recognizes a crucial truth, like the most popular um Star Wars, I'm your father. It's very popular. There's recognition where that thing that has been hidden finally comes to light. You get to realize, the audience gets to realize that this character is the villain's father. I've forgotten this film. There's a film that I think is Mark Wahlberg that did it. The part two came out sometime last year, where in the part one, he was getting into issues. And then we finally realized that his opposition is actually his father, who was not happy with him for leaving the cabal and tried to kill him for leaving the cabal. And you're shocked, like, why is his father trying to kill him? So you have that. And then you have the cliffhanger. You have the cliffhanger. That is like I said in last class, this is very popular in series. You know, they leave you wanting more, and then they tell you, um, watch out for the next series in the next episode. Watch out for the next episode, and you're like, I wish I could watch it. Right now the Netflix streaming system has sort of affected the cliffhanger thing. Although they are now going back to it by making it two parts, where they release episodes 1 to 4, and then after like a month they release 5 to the rest. So it's that way of creating cliffhangers too, with the way they are releasing the films. You know, then we have the third part of plot devices. We have the remaining two, which is the Chekhov's gun and the Deus Machina. So what is the Chekhov's gun? It is if this is shown, it has to make sense. It has to be that this matters. You get um I'm trying to remember. There's okay, I'm trying to remember one, but there's one of the recent scripts I wrote. It opens with it opens with the camera, it opens with a cupboard, a half open cupboard, and then pans to the rest of the room. It's just a second. You see the cupboard. Then at the end of the film, you get to realize the impact of that cupboard. There's something in that cupboard that is crucial to the rest of the story. So that's what a Chekhov's gun is. You show something, and everything shown has to have a meaning. It has to be that it plays a central role to the rest of the story. So it's not just a prop. A prop, it has to be meaningful. In Chekhov's gun, a prop has to be meaningful. And they have the Deus Machina, which is a sudden external rescue that resolves conflicts. Usually weak, but it can be justified if done well. But some audiences feel cheated in this sort of thing. I'm trying to remember a film that there are films that you would watch, and true, the protagonist or the actor is meant to be dead. Like they lost, Yes, they killed the antagonist, but they also lost. They're not supposed to live. And then somehow you see an external force, external character coming in to save this person. And you now know they're setting us up for part two. They want to have a sequel. So that's very popular. That's the Ex Machina technique in plot devices. It's very common in some films that are, aiming to do the part one, part two, and all that. I mean, when you think of the Fast and the Furious franchise, it usually uses that Ex Machina um, technique. So, about building tension and suspense. So, when you're writing a story, when you're telling a story, you want to build tension, you want to, create suspense because that is what draws in your audience. You want them to anticipate things. You don't want them. I mean, if a plot is unraveled, if it shows itself, then what's the point of it? Just like you buying a book that you already know what is going to happen in it. What's the whole point? Even if sometimes, even if you know the ending, what you're interested in is, what was the conflict? How did it resolve before it arrived at, a happily ever after? It's not usually about the action. It's about what the audience wants to see unravel, what they want to see happen. So for you, if you master suspense, then you can master information, time and holding stakes. So what are the 5 engines of tension? You have the stakes, you have the escalation, you have the delay, you have the information control, and you have the uncertainty of outcome. The certainty of outcome. What are the stakes here? It could be personal, it could be moral, it could be physical, it could be emotional. It's something that makes the audience really care about this character's journey. That makes them, want to see what's going to be the outcome here. Then what's the escalation? Is that, it never gets better. So it's as simple as that. It never gets better. When you think, oh, okay, this has been solved, it's as if a worse obstacle has been thrown into the works. Then what is the delay? The conflict doesn't resolve immediately. Like you're watching it and you think, if only this person should, why is this person not being truthful? Why is he or she trying to be, what this person trying to protect? Just tell the truth. Even you're like, just talk now, just talk the truth now. Waiting be this. Talk the truth. You as a writer, you've learned not to resolve that conflict. You're prolonging the uncertainty to amplify the dread because imagine you have to tell the truth of something and you're holding on to it and things are spoiling, which means there are more stakes in place. The outcome is going to be huge, much more huge than what it was before. Then you think of the information control, the partial revelation that keeps the audience leaning forward. You're able to give enough information but never too much. You just, in my place, you say you just give the person small fish and the person is wondering, you're giving me tail. When am I going to get the middle? When am I going to get the rest of it? So you master the art of, not giving out full information because, and in not giving out this full information, you're building out your plots. Then you have the uncertainty of outcome, which is there is multiple possible endings for this. The audience that is watching it is like, this could end this way and or the other way. I mean, I'm not so sure how this thing is going to end right now. You've kept your audience on the edge. They are seeing possible outcomes here and they don't know which it could be. So how do you construct a suspense? And we're going to use an example written in this resource. What is the scene here? A character is searching an empty house. We know the killer is inside because we are seeing the killer. You and I that is watching the film, we are seeing the killer. But the character cannot see him. And now, the character needs backup and has to call a backup, but the batteries are 2%. And just as he's about to make a call, battery dies, and you hear a door creak. You hear the sound of a door. And the character stops. Am I alone? Is someone here with me? Is the killer inside? Am I safe? That's the tension you've created. You've been able to create that dramatic irony, the ticking clock with the dying battery. You've created delay. There's no immediate payoff. No call was made, so there's no immediate payoff. And there's this uncertainty. Will this person find the person in this house? If not, her life is at risk. So now, how do you write a strong resolution? We all know what a resolution is. We talked about it, denouement, where the film resolves, where everything, the question is finally answered, where we see the transformation, the result of the transformation, where every promise that was made is fulfilled. And this is the hardest part of screenwriting, to be honest, because you can give a weak resolution and people will not feel satisfied. So to give a clear resolution, you have to start with the dramatic question that you use in the opening scene. What was the question that you threw out at your audience? How do you answer it? Now, there are some films where you see, you can never watch a film where something is not answered. The question is not answered. But you can watch a film where there's ambiguity. That is, there is an open-ended, resolution. Is ambiguous. Is open to interpretation. If the logline says this woman has to do this thing in order to expose a corruption happening, the resolution expected is whether she exposed it or not. That's where your audience is investing their emotional energy. And if you don't resolve it, you've broken that contract to your audience. You've lost them. Now, we have two types of resolutions here. The external and internal resolution. And we have one thing we have to understand about this resolution is that transformation is much more impactful than outcome. There needs to be a transformation that happens with your audience than an outcome. There was a script I wrote and I sent it out for review. And when they gave me my notes, they pointed out that the resolution was more focused on the outcome than the transformation of the main character. And immediately I read it, I just understood. I just said, yes, they're right. I was more focused on the outcome than on how this character that I've introduced to my audience from the beginning, taking them through the ups and downs with this character. How does that transformation that she faced help her resolve the conflicts that she's been facing? So it's an easy mistake to make. So it's easy, is always seek that clarity where you're asking, what's the transformation here and not the outcome? The external resolution here is, did they win or lose? That's an outcome, but it's not a sufficient ending. The internal resolution is, did they change? Was the villain finally arrested? Did the hero choose integrity over revenge? Was the emotional shift satisfying? You know, so that's the difference. Did they win or lose is an outcome, but the transformation that happens is, so what happens here for the hero? Did they learn something? You know, if you watch a film where there's a final fight between the protagonist and the antagonist, and clearly they've gotten to that part where the protagonist has maybe a knife or a gun and has every opening, has every clearing to kill the character as revenge, and brings down the knife to stab and stops short. And everybody around him is like, kill the person. Now this person is a thorn in your flesh. Kill him or her. And he says, you know what? I'm just going to hand you over to the police so that justice will prevail. I am not going to stain my hands with your blood, but I'm going to allow justice prevail. Now, he won. The character has won, but not in the kind of way you would expect. He kills him and is an open and shut case. He has won because you've seen this person that's been bloodthirsty, that's been thirsting for this villain's blood, got to that point where you think, yeah, he was going to follow it through. But he says, you know what? I'm a better person than this. And I'm going to allow justice prevail rather than being the vigilante. Now, payoff. The payoff has to be critical. That's why I said anything that you introduce in a story has to be resolved, has to pay off one way or the other. And like he mentioned here, this is why the Chekhov's gun exists. If you see a film where a prop was given so much TV time, and then at the end of the day, it's just there. It doesn't play any central role to the story. It pisses you off because you're like, why the hell did you waste our time on this prop if it was just there for their sake? So what are these payoffs we are talking about? We are talking about foreshadowed objects. We are talking about thematic statements. We are talking about emotional promises. We are talking about character flaws. Foreshadowed objects, if they appear, has to be resolved. They have to play a central role. If you're going to show us an artwork, what is in a film? What is the point of that artwork? What does it really mean in that story? Relationships, if you're going to establish relationships between people, it has to come to a conclusion. It has to arrive at a conclusion. Is it make or break? And does it add to the story? Then for the theme, remember, the theme of the story, you know the theme of the story. Is it answered in the ending? Is it answered? Then your character flaws. Were they confronted? Did they overcome it? Did they surrender to it? Did the protagonist end up being the villain? Did the villain end up being the protagonist? What transformation went on here? Even between the protagonists, even between the I just remembered a film I watched last weekend, Mercy, and the villain. At the end of the film, we got to see how the villain, who was doing everything to revenge his brother's death, realized we could see him come to a realization. Even the protagonist he was pursuing also came to a realization that this villain is doing this because another character created a situation that was not ideal. So he was given a wrong info. That's information control. If you remember, we mentioned information control. There was an information control that led to a spiral of everyone believing different things, which added to their character arc and their character flaws. Now we're coming to types of ending. That Now we said types of satisfying endings because for this class, every ending has to be satisfying. I beg. If your ending is not satisfying, then oof, you've lost your audience. So there are 5 satisfying endings here. You have the victory ending. This is where the protagonist achieves the goal. You know, you have this in an adventure, you have this in sports, inspirational films. You know, there's a satisfaction that comes from an earned success, as it says here. And they have the tragic but meaningful. They fail. The protagonist fails, but gains an insight, you know. And this is usually in drama, tragedy, and psychological films. It's usually an emotional thing. You know, it comes from an emotional truth. Then you have the inevitable ending. You know, logically, this is where this ending has to arrive at. I mean, the audience is watching it and they're like, of course, it has to arrive at this ending. It's inevitable. Because, and this is where you think about the cause and effect. Because if you don't do this and this, and if you don't do this, this happens. Therefore, there's an inevitable ending to it. Then you have a twist ending. That is reversal, which changes interpretation. However, for this to happen, you have to have seeded this part earlier in the story. So that when the audience is watching it, they have that aha moment where they were like, aha. Okay, this was why in Act 1 or in Act 2, this was done. I can see why or how it contributes to this twist. It's not a random thing. It's not just, I feel like twisting the story, then you twist it. It has to be craftfully and artfully done. Then you have the open but thematically closed. Now, talked about open-ended endings. You know, the theme is resolved, but we don't really know, did this person survive? We know, you know, they wanted to save someone and it took them a while. They were scared to do it. And finally they go to save the person. And in saving the person, you know, they are also taken or they also fall into that same pit. But one thing we know is that before they saved that person, they went in without fear. And they went in without fear. They had resolved that this is worth it. And fear is the price I'm going to pay. And I'm going to go into this knowing that I'm doing my best. So you will now know that this character has been able to surmount an emotional fear, an emotional challenge. But yes, we do not know if they survived. We do not know if they made it, but we know that they're now a different person. This character arc that has happened before the person is taken. So the structure of a resolution now, but if you've been paying attention to all that we've been saying, this image would make a whole lot of sense to you. The structure of a strong resolution, the final confrontation, the decision, the consequence, the emotional beat, and the final image. Every resolution has to follow this arc or follow this structure in order to arrive at that final image. If you're looking for something that an audience would carry with them. Then the final image technique. This is, you know, if you watched a film and example here, the opening image is a lonely man eating alone. And then the final image is this man is surrounded by people. So it's one of the most visual powerful tools in screenwriting. Because personally, I call it like a loop. That's what I call it, a loop. It sort of like takes you back. It takes you back to the first, but in a way that is different. It's a contrast, but it's a loop. It shows you the difference from where we started. You know, how we started and how we arrived. That's what it is about. You know, a lonely man eating alone who is having a hard time making friends. And by the end of the film, we see he has made friends. He's surrounded by people. Now, how do you avoid an unsatisfying ending? We've talked about different things here. And how do you avoid an unsatisfying ending for your audience? The direct machina or machina, some people say it's machina, not machina, actually, machina. The ex machina, and they're pronouncing it wrong. You don't just throw a character in. You don't just, because your character is suffering, the protagonist is suffering, then you just throw in one character like that to come and rescue, like an angel or something. Meanwhile, there is no place in your story you even mention that an angel, this person is spiritual or anything. All of a sudden, we are now seeing a rescue. And the audience is like, from where to where? Where is this person coming from? So that's that type of unsatisfying ending. Then you have the abrupt cut without an emotional beat. You end before the audience has a moment to even feel the resolution. The audience cannot feel. The audience like, has this been resolved? Why is it being ended? Why is it being ended this way? You just cut it off because you feel, oh, you're creating a suspense. No, you just cut off your audience from understanding your film to the end. Then you have ignoring character arc, where your character is just one-dimensional. Nothing, no change, nothing, just a one-dimensional character. And even in the end, we don't see how all these things he or she has gone through has contributed to him or her. I mean, we talk about character development. How does that even factor in your ending? How does it resolve that protagonist's journey? Then we have the one where you've explained everything. You're trying to, you're trying to, you feel like, this story is so deep, my audience will not understand it. Then you try to explain. It creates an audience that feels manipulated, that feels like they are not trusted to understand the story, and you lose them. Then you have the no consequences, where there is no cost, there is no satisfaction. This film, a lot of people argue that this popular Nigerian film that a lot of people argue that there was no consequence. This came at Dirty Bar's film, the one with hmm? The other one, the most popular, the had part one and part two. I've forgotten the title. With Madam Shola, Shoabi, that's her name. Hmm? Not the other one, the one that came before it. I've forgotten the title. The one where she was a gangster and clearly, you know, a lot of people expected that. People said, oh, that her film glorified, corruption. It glorified being a gangster. It glorified people getting away with things. So you have your audience already complaining because you're also thinking about your culture. Yeah, King of Boys. You're also thinking about the culture you come from. It's a very important thing to consider when you're telling stories because you come from a culture that believes in cause and effect, that believes that if you do something wrong, you should be punished for it. And then you're telling a story where this character is not being punished. You're just making it more of like an internal conflict thing. And then the rest of the people who suffered her this thing just become props in her story. So you have that kind of thing. So a lot of people complain about it because they felt there was no consequence to it. So when you're telling a story, you also have to consider these things like that. Then catharsis. This word. when I was in doing my English classes in school. For every this thing, every literary work we examine, catharsis. Um, I think the easiest way, okay, the easiest way catharsis was explained to us was after crying, you know, after you made something hurts you and you have a very good cry. After crying, that thing you feel, the way you feel after crying, you know, that tension that leaves you, that tension, they said they say you purged yourself, that tension that leaves you, that time when you've made peace, that's actually the catharsis. That's catharsis. So imagine it in filmmaking where you've put people through a lot and they have to arrive at that point where they are back. They feel like, you know, tension has been resolved. Tension at this highest has come down. The conflict has been resolved. The stakes, resolved. The character has paid a price. And now, you know, you feel like this character they've done their best. They've reached that peak where what could go wrong now? They've reached that emotional peak where you know that they just have to win. You've put them through the ringer, like they say. And you just know for all these things they've gone through, they just have to win. Success must be their own. So we have a sample resolution of a thriller here. We have a climax, we have consequence, and we have emotional beats, and we have final image. So imagine, now you have to apply your imagination here. A newscaster has been following some bad police officers, and she has evidence of the crime they've committed. And now she has to upload that evidence to the internet. She has to upload it. As she's plugging it in, we see the police officers climbing the staircase, rushing to her door. She has plugged it in. We can see the file reading 10%, 20%, banging on the door at 30%, by 60%, we see her panicking, figuring out how does she escape. So now we have two things. We have an upload happening slowly. We have a character that has to escape. And then before we know it, it's at 90% and the door breaks open and the police grabs her. And before they look at the computer and see what is uploading, and before they try to unplug it, it says upload complete. And now she's arrested. And then the video she uploaded is now goes online. One person sees it, shares it, and it's now viral. And now she's been arrested. She's now in jail, knowing that the truth is out there. Yes, she has lost her freedom, but she knows that the truth is out there. So that's a kind of resolution for a thriller. Then we have an advanced kind of resolution where the resolution must answer the theme. Like I said, every story, remember the dramatic question, has a question and then it has a theme. Every strong story asks a thematic question. Let me see if it's charging. I don't know. Has a thematic question, and every ending must take a stance, not just to resolve the plot, but to answer the question that the film has been asking all along. Something like, is truth worth sacrifice? Can people change? Is revenge fulfilling? If your theme is truth demands sacrifice, then the ending has to reflect a sacrifice. The ending, that is the theme and the resolution cannot be separable. They are linked. If a truth has to be revealed, something has to be sacrificed. If something has to happen, some people have to change. If there is a movement that has to happen, some people have to change. If someone has to revenge, then we have to know, was it a fulfilling revenge or not? Now, we're going to look at the complete framework at a glance. Because you have to remember that every element of film story structure connects to one universal truth, which is that the audience must always know what questions they're waiting to see answered, and that every scene must move them closer to that answer. What are the key principles to remember? We have 5. 1, dramatic question is everything. Without it, your scenes just become episodic, because every moment is supposed to have purpose and momentum. The second is that the structure has to have cause and effect, not just sequence. There should be a cause and effect. Because of this is happening. That's how you move from plot to plot. Random events should not just happen. There has to be a cause and event and an effect. Then we have to remember that the opening has to lock your audience in. You have to establish the tone, hint at the question, and make something change, all within your first scene. And then we also have to remember the fourth, which is that transformation matters more than outcome. Remember, I mentioned sometimes you are more focused on the outcome, that we forget that the impact of the story is more in the transformation. The audience are with you for the emotion. That's why they are there with you. And the most satisfying ending delivers both external and external resolutions. Then you have the final image, which is your last word. Contrast it with your opening image. Let the visual transformation speak for itself. So you can now go and build your invisible skeleton for your story. Now we've given you different parts of this skeleton. It's now for you to build it. If you decide to put your skull at the feet, it's left to you. If you decide to put your hip at where the skull is meant to be, now you sabi. We've given you every part of the skeleton for proper and a structured storytelling, and it's now left for you to use it and tell wonderful stories. Right. So we're going to look at a sample script analysis here. We're trying to tie up everything that you've learned with this sample script. This sample script is called The Missed Call, and it's a psychological thriller. And we're going to be examining the core elements and dramatic question at its heart. So remember, genre. The genre here is psychological thriller. But what is the dramatic question here? Will Ada discover who is calling her from her own phone before something irreversible? For her own phone number before something irreversible happens. I need you to employ your imagination here. You have your own phone. You have your phone with you, and your own phone number is calling you. So you have a dramatic question. You have the why, who, how. So we have the opening image here, which is the hook. Interior of bedroom, night. We have the total silence. We have total silence. A faint hum of generator outside. Like I said, employ your imagination here. Ada, who is 28 years, is sharp but exhausted, and she lies awake, staring at the ceiling. Her phone light lights up. She hears her own voice speaking back to her from the phone, but it's a distorted version of her own voice. And that voice is telling her in this ominous tone, you shouldn't have checked the folder. And the line cuts and it's cut to black. Now you've raised question, who is calling? What folder is they talking about? Is she in danger? Excuse me. So now we have the inciting incidents. Interior, Ada's apartment. She's in the morning, she's scrolling through her laptop. Now we see a hidden folder called Archive 7. She hesitates and opens it. We see video files, security footage, a date from 2 years, and her expression changes. Now, we see her reflection in the blank screen. There's a slight delay in movement, showing that something is off, which is that we have foreshadowed that there is something off here. Her phone buzzes, and it's that text message from her own number still, telling her, delete it before 6 p.m. And we look at the clock on the time tag on her laptop, and it says 10:42. Countdown has begun. Then we hear, which is the confrontation and escalation. The interior of an office during the day. Ada is on the phone trying to call her provider. No record of the phone. She's checking cloud backups, nothing. She opens the video and we see a security footage from a hospital corridor, time stamped 2 years ago. A stretcher rushes past. She pauses and zooms in. Ada, oh. She steps back like this is not possible. Her phone buzzes again. And the message that comes in now is telling her, you weren't supposed to survive. Remember, her name is Ada. And she was carried on a stretcher. She saw herself being carried on a stretcher. And now the call is telling her, you weren't supposed to survive. Now we're getting to the midpoint, the power shifts, where the danger becomes internal. Ada checks hospital records online. Her name appears in a coma reports 2 years ago, 3 weeks. What was the cause? Fall from height. She fell from a height. But Ada is confused. She has no memory of ever even being in a hospital falling from a height. Her phone rings again. And Ada hears herself tell her through the phone, you asked what happened and you're about to find out. Now you're asking, is this real? Is this psychological? This is spirits. Is she real? Who is real here? That's what you're asking. Then the escalation. The all is lost moments. For the escalation, we have the lights flickering. Her reflection in the mirror lags again, slightly delayed. That means she's looking at the mirror, and if she's shifting, it takes 2 seconds for the for the for the image in the mirror, her reflection in the mirror to shift. Just think of when you're answering a call and the time and it lags, video lags. That happens. And she turns quickly. She turns quickly. Was that real? Did I notice something? But nothing. Now the audience is watching it and they see the faint movement behind her in the mirror before she does. Now Ada checks the time and it's 5:32 p.m. Clock is ticking louder. Remember the timeline she was given, the time she was given. Now all its lost moments. She plays the video file again, the final video file. And we see a security footage, the rooftop. We see her arguing with someone off frame. That means we can't see the person in the frame. But the audio is distorted. She screams, then she jumps. The footage glitches upon impact. Ada is shaking. I didn't. She's now shaking like, I didn't. And the phone rings and her voice comes again and tells her, you did. Now we get to the dark night of the soul and the recognition moments. At this point, Ada collapses. And this is where her memories starts to flash back in quick cuts. We get to see argument. We get to see betrayal. We get to see her being pushed. And we get to see her fall. This is where she recognizes she wasn't job. She was pushed by someone. Now, she rewinds the video. She needs to see that frame. And then she gets to hear the voice of her ex-business partner. This is where the truth is revealed. She was pushed off the roof by her ex-business partner. Now, the resolution and the climax. Here is now 5:58 p.m. and her phone buzzes and tells her, delete it. But she doesn't. Instead, she uploads the footage to cloud and schedules an automatic send to police at 6:05 p.m. Her phone rings again and herself tells her, if you send that, we both disappear. Now, the audience notices that her reflection in the mirror is speaking before she does. And what we have there is a split-second double image. Now we realize the color is not supernatural. It's not her spirit. It's trauma. Her fractured mind is protecting her from the truth. It's 6 p.m. now, and the upload is complete. The phone goes silent. The reflection sinks normal again. In the final image and ending bits, we get to see the police station. It's now night. Ada is sitting calmly. And detective is watching the footage. And detective tells her this is strong evidence. Ada looks at her reflection in the table on the table surface. It's perfectly synced. No delay. Her phone buzzes softly. This time around is an unknown number, but she doesn't check it. It's cut to black. Now you've seen how we've been able to sync the opening image and the last image. If you pay attention, you will see the link. I'll take you back so you can see this. We've been able to link it back. We've been able to create a contrast, the opening image and the final image. So, are there any questions? We've come to the end of this. Are there any questions that you have for me? Or any comments, anything that you need clarification on? Drop it in the chats. Yeah, but before you even drop the questions, first of all, I've been talking for 2 hours. Oh yeah, start clapping. It's not easy. Appreciate me. Oh yeah. Okay, so thank you, Prince, for clapping. Thank you, Ahmad Mohammed. Thank you, Miracle. Thank you, Prince. Thank you, everyone. So if you have any question to ask, this is your moment before we call it a day. Thank you, everyone, for clapping. So now it's time. It's time for questions. If you have any question, please let me know. Even if you have a script that you're writing and you want us to, you have there's some you're hooked on somewhere. You can just tell us just explain. And if there's any way I can help you explain it better, I would. So I have a question from Prince that says, is moral lesson behind the story? Okay, can a moral lesson behind the story be described as transformation rather than outcome? I think this is an important question. But then again, for me to answer this question, I will have to understand, moral. When it comes to moral lessons, films with moral lessons, like Nigerian films, mostly cause and effects, really. This was done and it's created this. Now, let's say I'm trying to look for an example I can create. Um, let's look for an example. Let me think of a Nigerian film. I'm trying to think of a Nigerian film with outcome and well, I'm trying to think of a Nigerian film anyway, but I think first of all, if to answer this is more about what's the dramatic question, because it's when we know the dramatic question that we know what the outcome is and what the transformation is. Um, what you should be gunning for is a transformation, not just a mere outcome. Like I said, it's easy to tell a story and end with an outcome than showing the transformation that goes on for your hero, for your, for the protagonist and all that. It's easy to say the moral lesson here is moral lesson is I'm just trying to come up with an example and I'm blank anyway, but it's going to come. It's going to come. Moral lesson, check it in on Nigerian movies now. Okay, let's think of a Nigerian movie where let's use the what happens in our country. So you're doing a movie about ritual killings, yeah? I know most of our movies are about at the end of the day, we get to see they confess, They confess, I killed my mother, I wanted to buy a Jeep, all those sort of things. And, you know, we get to see that this person confesses, not because they were caught. Sometimes in Nigerian movies, because they were merely caught. um but you see some films where the character, a character goes through different things and comes to the realization that this is not a life I should be living, and then makes a confession and decides that they are going to give up everything and they are going to subject themselves to justice. Now, the outcome here is, it could be the outcome that the person is arrested, but you can see the transformation that this person has changed. There, someone has said it here. Yeah, someone arrested outcome. The repentance is the transformation. Exactly. So you get to see this ritualists, go through the motions, say, oh, I repent. I don't want to be this person. It has cost me this. It has cost me that. But at the end of the day, the person has to still pay the price. There's this Nigerian film I watched that made me laugh because I forgot. I can't remember the title really, but it sort of got me upset, but at the same time made me laugh because I was like, it was a film about a woman who stole a child, and the child grew up and found out that she was stolen, and at some point, confronted the mother, and then had to, go on a quest to find her birth mother, and then when she found her birth mother, the birth mother accepted her. You would expect that the woman who stole the child would, the birth mother would insist that the mother who stole the child would go to prison for theft, theft of a child. The next thing I saw is they were hugging and crying, I forgive you, I forgive you. And I said, what the hell is happening here? What is that? The resolution was so weak. You're just focused on the outcome of, will the child forgive the mother? When a child finds out that the mother is not her mother, will she forgive the mother? Will she forgive the person she thought that was her mother? That was what they were gunning for, and just ended it at just that. Where is, I forgive you, mother? But there was no. It's in my place. You say it didn't fool my belly. My stomach was not full because I was like, what the hell is that? The outcome of this story is what? That was so as you who is watching it, you're thinking, so if I go and steal someone's child, I'm open to forgiveness now. You know, there is no, there was no act to this, even the character that stole the child. She was only worried about losing the child. There was no sympathy. There was no empathy for the crime that he or she committed. Nothing. It's just, I don't want to lose you, so you're going to call another person mother. And it was such a weak thing. I watched it, I was like, this is such a weak story. So yes, we have. So when you're telling stories, you have to focus more on the transformation. Think the character development. Think character arc, think emotional beats. These are the things that would help you, that's why I talk about character Bible a lot. When you have a character Bible and create this character, you have a character. It's like, think of your creator made you. Your creator has made you and knows your weakness and your strength. That is how it should be when you're creating a character. You're creating this character, person on some occasions they get sense, so but when they reach you to this occasion, they get sense. You are the one that created this character, and let those flaws, let those strengths and flaws work for you. Let it be what you use to create the plot line that moves the plot line. And another thing is, don't be so focused on only your main character having character flaws and development. Other characters supporting the character should have those things too, but everything they are doing is to support the main character. Always remember they are there to support the main character, for good or for bad. So their own character flaws and weaknesses should also help in resolving the resolution. Yes, I agree with you, Prince. Say, how could the Nigeria censorship board be encouraged to approve based on transformation rather than mere outcomes to reduce negative effects on the audience? Honestly, I cannot really say that. I don't know the parameters. I only know that I don't know the parameters they use in judging most films. The only one I know is the PG, that's the parental guidance, the age limit. But in terms of you know, reducing the negative effects on the audience, I don't really think I mean, at this point, I really, I think the best thing we can do is just to this kind of training where we train people to recognize these things, to understand it and tell better stories. I think that's just the best we can do. Because I don't see the censor board really stepping in to tell you, oh, your outcome is this, you don't have transformation. Even them myself don't even understand it. Their own is, um, does it meet the PG? Is it 18? Is it family watchable? That's just their own. Is it does it incite violence? Does it incite tribalism? That's just their own. Every other thing, I think they just leave to the audience to decide whether they like this filmmaker or this scriptwriter or not. And hence the whole purpose of this training that you're undergoing. Okay, Ahmad, for your question, I think the admin is going to get back to you on how to update your Link School app or laptop. So any other question? Someone asked, please, when you're writing your assignments, is it good for you to put reference to your writing? Not really compulsory, but yeah, not a compulsory thing, but it's to also let whoever is reading your assignment to know that you did research. So, and to be honest, research is good for you. Okay, I'm looking for more questions. Any? Okay, I mean, if I'm not getting questions, that means that you guys understood the class perfectly. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that compliment. Okay, so in the absence of any other question, um, I would advise you, I think to be a script writer, you also need to be reading scripts. There are sites online where you can download scripts to read, really. It helps you not only understand formatting, but also help you understand bits, because it bits in script, how to use it perfectly well in scripts. So there are any well, not Nigerian, but most foreign scripts are online, most Hollywood scripts are online. Some Nigerians also put their own online, but I don't know where, I can't really say where to find them. But you can find about any other scripts you want, especially Oscar winning films. You can find their scripts online. So yes, check them out. It helps you learn formatting. It helps you learn, you read a script, you already know what story structure, what model was used to tell this story. And please watch films. Watch films to critique and understand. Don't watch just for entertainment. Watch it to apply what you've learned in class. And that's how you start, you start understanding, and it's easy for you to, because it means if you catch something, you can easily catch it on your own paper. You can easily say when you're making a mistake on your own paper. I mean, I'll have to, when you're writing a story, you're just writing, the muse is there. And sometimes you just get carried away. But the whole point of this class is that even if you give your script to someone and the person says this should be done this way, you already clock it and know, yes, this is the technique, or this is the model that will fit this story. So once again, thank you. Your assignments, please deliver on your assignment is very important. Like I said, it helps you get better. It helps you build muscle. It helps you build muscle. And if you have any scripts you're working on by the side, also review it based on what you've learned and rework it. There's no crime in reworking what you've learned. So we've come to the end of this class, and I thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week for our next class. And please show up and tell your friends to also show up. We have that would be, I think, one of for the script writing, that will be part the last my own last class. So you have a lot to learn, and I would be happy to see you all there. So have a great evening and have a wonderful weekend ahead. You know, stay safe and be kind to one another. So bye and have a good night.